What's up, Embodying, and welcome to another episode of the Yours Truly podcast. Today, I have Ethan Caughey, Skankenstein, and Luke Freeman here with me, and this is going to be kind of a more impromptu episode. I am just kind of hosting their idea, taking influence from Chad the Alcoholic's channel, The Friday Morning Nameless, and kind of being a platform for other people to kind of talk about Ross Byrd's Parish Manifesto. I've talked on Luke's podcast about that. I've talked with Ross about that. Made my own little video about kind of my own personal manifesto related to that in a way. So we're going to continue that conversation with Ethan Caughey, Skankenstein, and Luke Freeman. Remember, if you're interested in supporting the channel, like, subscribe, and if you want to become a channel member, it helps support the channel financially. So please do that. So without further delay, that's really just kind of the main intro. We're going to get into it. And so here's Ethan, Luke, and Skankenstein.
Hi, this is Christian Baxter, and you're listening to Yours Truly, a place we go to think out loud.
We're recording now. Basically, just go back on why you, Ethan, why you kind of got everyone together, and we'll just start rolling from there. And I like that little point that you made at the end, like the identity thing.
The identity thing. Oh, goodness. Here we go. Well, I had a conversation with Ross Byrd, and I knew that Christian had a conversation with Ross Byrd, and I knew that Luke knew him a little bit, and I knew that Skankenstein really liked the surf camp guy. So I wanted to talk about some of Ross Byrd's ideas around evangelicalism, and just kind of like hash it up a little bit.
Got it. So you were asking, what did you just say? You said something like,
I asked you if you had a church or a church plant.
Oh, yes. And so it is a church. It's both. So yes. And you said something, you said what was compelling about Ross was that his, it was like
he's
kind of
still arguing for evangelicalism.
Yeah, it was a kind of a distinct evangelical argument. So that was interesting to me. And explain why that, how you see that maybe. Well,
yeah, I've got some notes here. He wrote this article called A Parish Manifesto. And so he has kind of 4 points about like what a parish manifesto could look like. So he talks about parishes. It said parish means neighborhood, from the Greek paroikos, meaning to dwell beside. And so talking about like a neighborhood church that has a graveyard, which is like a sign that this thing's going to last for generations. He talks about steeples and the need for beautiful things. He talks about priests, which are unbusy holy people who represent God to the people and the people to God. And then he talks about the people and what it would look like for people to kind of function in something modern and ancient. In some sense, it's almost like so much of the fuel that's driving people into orthodoxy, which is this modern ancient thing. He's almost arguing for some of that to occur within evangelicalism, maybe.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So what do you think that means?
Can I just talk a little bit about how Ross has influenced me? I just wanted to pick up on, Ethan, what you were talking about. I think my interactions with Ross, I mean, he and I were able to have a private conversation, and then I think I really became familiar with like his way of thinking when I was on the Portal, which is like a philosophy community. Christian was like featured as a guest, and Ross as well was a speaker. Cadell Last hosts it, and so it was a discussion about like Megagelicalism. And I found Ross able to like really go say toe to toe with let's just say the Evangelical or folks who, would consider themselves Christian atheists. Like, just the way he was able to communicate his Christianity was just very, I think, relevant and compelling. And, he was able to speak across divides. I mean, you did a great job too, Christian. You were excellent, but since we're talking about Ross, anyway, that really drew me into him. And I think in him, like you were saying, Ethan, I really saw someone from like the evangelical tradition who is still like goes to a, big Eva church, able to incorporate, I think, everything that we have found so compelling about, say, like symbolic world, kind of Pajot, Orthodox iconography, symbology, ways of reading the scriptures, incorporate that into his evangelicalism. And again, this manifesto is kind of, I think, almost like an integration of like bringing Christian tradition into a modern expression, like through evangelicalism, which to me just feels so fresh. And on a personal level, just my interactions with Ross has made me much more okay with staying evangelical. You know what I mean? Like, he's kind of given me a path for like treasuring like, say, like the best of Christian tradition and like both the East and West, both Orthodoxy and Roman Catholic tradition, like treasuring that, but also understanding that I was formed as an evangelical. So in some ways that is my tradition, but there's a way of incorporating this deeper tradition into like an evangelical expression of Christianity. So anyway, that's what I wanted to say. I think, yeah, he's a very important person.
What about you, Matt? Matt?
Yeah, it's my name. Just trying to get a big loud flag to like draw attention away from my personal life, Mostly want to like not kind of like pick up the ball that Luke just passed and think about like how do we, I guess, like the potential in evangelicalism that Ross is showing us. And I think part of it is the fact that like it's up to this point been such a present focused sort of thing. It almost like lives in like conscious denial that we have a history. And I think one of the things that you like didn't pick up on in your introduction is the fact that he starts out as Parish Manifesto, Ross does, by saying like he's trying to push evangelicalism forward by moving it beyond its sort of like present focused, content focused thing to recognize like we inhabit a history, and trying to figure out how to reclaim that history is actually the best way to lead into this present moment. History is what the kids want right now, and it's what we've been denying them for a very long time.
Are you a kid? I'm a kid, and I'm 40.
Do you remember what I do for a living, man? Yes.
I don't, actually.
I make balloon animals.
Okay.
I'm not a kid. I'm just very immature for my age.
I'm just saying that I resonate with whatever the kids were wanting. That was kind of
this like the things he's talking about, they have been talked about for the last 25 years. When Robert Weber's Ancient Future Faith, that was all the emergent stuff was part of this. So it's like we've been kind of like churning this idea, trying to get enough like groundswell or enough folks to like pick it up that we can move somewhere. But
my experience as somebody that was a practitioner of the modern and then the kind of those postmodern influences within the church was like, the thing about history was a creative element. Let's add a creative element of history. History wasn't like something that you were trying to like embody or even really learn from. It was like kind of it was only an aesthetic. Where I've come to now is that there's these frames that we have, especially coming from the evangelical context, is there's true spirits in which these things were developed. Like the modern worship frame has a spirit in which if you want to really embody that spirit, there's certain things you have to do with music, lights, with the venue, with audio. All of it you have to really engage what it means to be that, to embody that. You can't. And then there's the historical stuff, the tradition, and I think tradition is a better word, because the ancient faiths wouldn't look at my first growing up in the time that I was at First Baptist and look at that as tradition, probably. But when I think about what that tradition offered me, is related to things like John Vervaeke's Advent of the Sacred. There was still a sense of sacredness within that tradition, which is another word that I think is prescient related to what we're talking about, because we know that we have the term sacred cow, and like, oh, modern worship is my sacred cow, but that's really kind of that doesn't really identify what it means to like approach something with sacredness, something that's been with sacred, like consecrated with sacredness, that you're like approaching as sacred, as opposed to like, I really like this thing, so traditions offer a pathway towards it. It's a way in which you view it. It's a spirit in which you approach something with your attention. And the modern frame is, whether however you want to put it, U2, Coldplay, Hillsong United, arena rock, amphitheater rock is a spirit in which you have to embody to really get that, to transcend that the moment that you're in wherever ville you're at, and transcend into that space. And then the same thing with sacredness. And the thing about sacredness is that you can approach, and with what Ross is putting forward, and even his 4 kind of outlined things, it's much simpler. Like, you don't need, quote unquote, the lights and smoke machine, the smells and bells of modern, to approach things sacredly. That's part of the part of it. Whenever Luke and I had a conversation with Ross a few weeks ago, Luke brought out this really important word to attach to evangelicalism. And I think, Matt, you hit on it when you were talking about like the prescience, or what's like being so aware of the now and the culture of like evangelicalism, is because in a certain way it's been very porous in how it can like receive and jettison, new ideas or new things, these creative elements or whatever. So I think and I saw this kind of happen at Passion Conference, a little clip I saw from like last year's, right when I started playing on the internet over a year ago. And their biggest, like most powerful moment that they were pumping on Instagram was the moment where like Christian Stanfield led everyone in Agnus Dei, which is an ancient like part of Christian worship. That was the big thing that they pumped last year. And so even in that, like, you can be like, oh, well, they're just doing things. But I just got the sense that it's like, we don't know where to go from here. So let's just go back, instead of, past nostalgia, pushing past nostalgia into something, I don't know, holy. Which is the words of the song, "Holy, you are holy," or maybe that's not it. I can't remember. Agnus Dei. Worthy. Okay. Well, maybe it does all of them. But anyways, like, I don't know. Those are some of my thoughts. I don't know if y'all
my snotty remark is: did they know that they were like reaching all the way back to the ancient past, or is it just like a boomer throwback to Third Day?
Well, it doesn't matter to me.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
Because even if it was just a nostalgic, because that's where people knew the song, but Third Day was throwing back to, like, I think Michael W. Smith in the 80s, actually. Yeah. Because when they did that song on their Offerings album, like, I think Michael W. Smith had already done it in the 80s, which was why people were familiar with it when Third Day did it in the late 90s, early 2000s. And again, so then you have to ask the question, where did Michael W. Smith get that from? That's the interesting thing, is recognizing where stuff comes from, and the story that's telling, whether you even know it or not. but then like in a sense being conscious about it, which goes back to what you were talking about, Matt, with
This is just a series of tiny leapfrogs till we actually get back to that mainline kind of like tradition Ross is talking about that he's trying to pillage. Not pillage, but I don't know. He's almost like the anti-redeemed Zoomer here in a different kind of mainline reclamation. Anyway, go ahead, Luke.
I would say the way I see it is that like that thread, that current has always been there. Like it's not so much as a disruption. It's just it's like a remembering. Does that make sense? It's like, I don't know. I don't know if you feel this way. So for me, I feel like a deep kind of resonance and kinship with my grandfather, my granddad on my mom's side. And I think about him all the time. And I didn't get a lot of time with him. He was really old when I was little. He wasn't able to do much, and he was like a retired Air Force colonel and a little gruff. But the more I learned about him, and especially as I grew into an adult, the more I realized how many similarities we had. And he passed away when I was in college. But he's in me, and I see things that I do, and like I think, oh, that's granddad, or granddad would be proud of me for doing this. And in some ways, I'm like embodying my granddad who's in me, he was latent in me. Like I don't see a lot of my granddad in my mom as much or in my dad as much. And in some ways, I feel like what Ross is doing is it's like a remembering of these older forms, that kind of had been forgotten in the way that, let's say, Christianity has been expressed in like, post-war America, in these kind of like evangelical expressions, which I think are just like, I mean, like you're saying, Christian, porous to the culture in a way that they just kind of absorb the like logic of capitalism and logic of growth, and logic of creating like a frictionless environment. Like that's essentially what the megachurch is. It's like reduce the friction as much as possible, create a space that really can just that flow of people. I mean, capitalism loves to like reduce barriers, make it easy to pay, make it easy to cross borders, make it easy to transact. That's like essentially what what the megachurch is. Like, just, it's very porous. Just come as you are, no expectations. Like Christianity just kind of absorbed that logic. And in some ways that's like that logic isn't working anymore. And so I think to me, the brilliance of Ross is just a remembering of, hey, I mean, we also have this in our past, which is much more kind of like a smaller, high friction way of doing things, which I think allows us to experience more meaning than the megachurch. And I think what he's made me see is there's like a continuity. I think I used to see like my evangelical upbringing as some kind of like a break off or like not being continuous with Christian tradition. But now I can see how it's part of Christian tradition. Like it's maybe like a tributary, but it's still like it's the same current, it's the same water, you know what I mean? Like kind of flowing from the same source. And just the fact that like, for me, like DC Talk and Third Day, they are my tradition. It's like it's so close. Like I think the thing is it gets so close, we become so familiar that it doesn't feel the same as I know, learning about the ancients, learning about the church fathers, but like the reality is this is our tradition, like it or not. I don't think we can escape it. I think that's what Ross has made me realize.
Yes. Yeah, that's kind of like the biggest thing that prevents me from making any kind of like dramatic ecclesiological moves from one tribe to the other is like I'm already ruined. I've already been made, I have already been made into the specific kinds of Christian that I am by these 30 some odd years. And so it's like to try and deal with my problems by acting like they're not there and joining a new tribe. That's just shoving them into the cellar and pretending they're not going to emerge in another 5-10 years.
Yeah, there you can have a version of self-hatred too. That's really unhealthy, and like you have to quote unquote incorporate the shadow or integrate the past in a way that I think if you're like running or you reject something as wholesale, like 30 years of your life, wholesale evil. It's like, is that really where we want to go? And I also think people have all sorts of critiques on this, but like different people are going to go like find this path at different speeds, and there's a more incremental speed or a more moderate speed, and then there's just like the full on metanoia speed. 180
road to Damascus kind of.
Yeah, and so I mean that does happen, and people are going to find themselves, and hopefully there's like healing in that journey through that process, but there is a part of like, what do you do with Christian? I mean Luke Thompson made this really interesting statement on McMo's stream the other day. He said he's like, I'm still probably more moved by a modern worship service emotionally than I am by the divine liturgy, because that's a big part of his life. It's like in his bones, to your point, Luke. And
he's
in all
such a Evangelical. He's like so Evangelical.
He's accepted that more this year. I think last year is a little bit hardcore, a little bit more hardcore apostolic. But like, I think that's also one of the aspects of this move is being able to say something like that out loud, and even for myself, like there's times where I want to, like in this journey that I'm on, I'm like, I just want to go full on smells and bells and or something. And that's just not where everybody's at in a certain, but I will say, like with Ross's manifesto, I think depending on the speed at which, there are certain thresholds that allow for that conversation to take on different levels more easily within a group of people. And, not everyone has spent, almost the better part of a decade listening to Jonathan Peugeot and Peterson, and, these ideas that have gotten people. And so if you're just now starting to have that conversation with people and they're just now like, that's another 10 years, in a certain way. Ethan, you haven't said anything in a while. So what's up? What's going through your mind?
I'm just thinking, Matt, what you said was really interesting because you were like, this is way back. You said, this was all stuff from the emergent church that it's being rechurned. And I can't stop thinking about that, because when I listen to Peterson and Peugeot, I keep thinking like, man, the emergent church was onto this stuff. And it's almost like there was this idea that was kind of starting to be born within the emergent church. And then it got like rushed away. And now people are like, wait, we still need the idea though. Like we need to, there's some stuff that got churned up that hasn't been maybe fully incorporated. Because what the emergent church ended as, people were like, well, I don't want that package. No, like I'm out on that. But there's all kinds of stuff that we need to like recover the treasure from that thinking and like build a new foundation with some of that stuff. Yeah, Christian, I would love to hear about your church plant, because right now I'm in Alaska and Jane and I are just kind of hopping from church to church, and just experiencing what's out there. We went to an Anglican church this past Sunday, and I'd never been to Anglican before. It was really cool. There was like I don't know what they call it, the time of peace, where you like walk around and offer peace to everyone in the room.
The passing of the peace, yeah.
The passing of the peace. And during that portion, we like chatted with the priest a little bit. But then when we got called up for Eucharist, like the priest offered it to us by name. And like, I can't tell you how meaningful or special it was to be a stranger in a place that I might not return to, but to still be offered Eucharist by my name. I was like, wow. I've been thinking about that going like, it's because it was a neighborhood thing. Like it's because it was a parish and like the priest doesn't have to learn 30 names. He just needed to learn 2 names that week. And I was, that meant a lot to me.
Yeah. 2 things on to respond to the I said postmodern, but the emerging church movement. The thing is that it was also it was tied to the historical thing, but it was also tied to progressive politics. And so you have to you can't really separate what happened with the emerging church to kind of like that progressive thing as well. In my opinion, is that it was so the kind of more theological, the aesthetic ideas, or the kind of the even ascetic kind of but see, Comer's doing it now, but he's doing it within kind of the more traditional Christian frame, and they were kind of wanting to bust through other Christian, theological traditions at the same time. So you kind of had it was going to go its own way, and as a result, like Rob Bell's on Oprah. Who's the guy that was at Blue Like Jazz? He's got like a media consultant company. Like these guys aren't even.
Is my favorite.
Like I'm just saying, like they when you abandon a certain part of the tradition it was so, and this was the other thing, and even a critique on evangelicalism, it's so driven by creativity. Like these were massively creative minds, and even in the modern worship movement, with the songwriters, like you have these like just. When I had this conversation with McMo a few weeks ago about creativity, like he was like, I wish there were like Christian music monasteries. I was like, yeah, it's called Hillsong, it's called Elevation, it's called Bethel. That already exists.
Yeah.
I mean, these people are paid to be, and they're very good. When Hillsong can take the #1 artist out of New Zealand, who was a Christian, Brooke Fraser, who wrote Hosanna, who wrote Lead Me to the Cross, who's written a bunch of the newer stuff, even on her albums and stuff. But she was also a recording art, like independent recording artist. They were like, you're amazing. Please come. We'll pay you lots of money. We'll put you on tour. We'll all that stuff. So, but what happens when the movement is driven by creativity? There's so much churn. Like, content churn. Someone mentioned content earlier. It's like, what's the next thing? And a lot of the people that I was around 10, 15 years ago in my state were the best graphic designers that were coming up. They were the best musicians, like in the state, young men that were like, because what was being elevated is like, oh, you're creative and you can do this thing. Yeah, we'll use you. And so, I think that's also like tradition is, we're not talking about making something new. We're talking about things that have been done a very long time. And that's another, I'll give Luke his flowers some more. It's like he talks about faithful innovation related to as you go forward. And I think that's a piece of it. So that's on the emerging church side, because I think there, like you, Matt, you mentioned Weber's Ancient Faith or Ancient Future Faith. And even like Mike Cosper, he works for Christianity Today. He had a book back about 10 years ago called Rhythms of Grace, where he was kind of a reformed view of worship. And, it was kind of dancing around some of the same. He's the guy that produced Rise and Fall of Mars Hill. He had some of that going on too, because he was a worship leader at a kind of a Baptist Reformed church before he made that move. But he would be on more of the traditional side where that was coming in. And so anyways, there's that whole conversation. But as far as for personally, like the church plant thing, sitting in the pews for 6 years, not doing anything at a church, and then kind of coming back, and there was like a buddy of mine's at like a church across town, and they do the full like multi-tracks and everything. And he was like, hey, Christian, come help us lead worship, after I'd like kind of quit my church that I'd been a part of for 20 years because of another devastating rise and fall of Mars Hill kind of situation. And I hopped right into their system, to the machine, click tracks and everything. And it was, and then a buddy of mine who was like working on a worship music video project. And he was like, hey, could y'all come, you and your wife come help record this? And then I'll lead worship on Sunday, and just like another like plug and play thing. Because I'd been doing all that stuff like before this little area of Arkansas was doing it, I was doing that. And so I have like that, I know there's no secrets there for me. And I see a lot of where people like Ian McGilchrist, people like Paul Kingsnorth, even like Wendell Berry, like and even Tolkien, like there's like a big critique of the machine. And I see that because, Luke, when you're talking about even the parts of evangelicalism, like the corporate capitalistic kind of low friction, that's like the machine. You're operating at like the machine pace is this low friction.
Machine logic. Yeah.
There's so much friction in the human pace.
Yes.
And even in like a traditional liturgy, in a certain way. And so that's kind of been some of the contrasts that I've been dealing with. At the same time, though, with what Matt has been talking about how you can easily kind of like slip into some self-hatred or anger, like about your past and where you've come from. Like I contend with that as well, because many of the people because when we're talking about ideas on the internet, it's also frictionless. Like we can get so idealized in these boxes that when you slam back into a leadership team meeting and no one else knows what the hell you're talking about, you're like, oh, no, I'm angry. And it's like, okay, that's not good. Like what's going on there? So that's part of it. And that's nobody's, and nobody's fault. They're not even at fault for that. It's just being where we've been. And however, like in our kind of 2-year, I use this illustration, at least for me, like going into, you get kind of spit out of one of the, kind of these kind of modernish church things. And then you're like, in the Peugeotian sense, like the low guy has gone out. Now you are a seed that is being like I wasn't the low guy from that. The logic of that place was not what was in a sense spit out, but like now I have like my, influences in me spit out into the world, and it spits in, it's into the ground. It's a seed. For the most part, for the last 2 years, we were like in a basement doing like liturgy. And I just started doing liturgy. Like sometimes we were in a living room, but which I had done liturgy with some of these people like over 10 years ago or so. Like we'd read the creed sometimes, we'd do confessions of sin sometimes, we'd do call to worship. Like it was very much wrapped in the modern frame. These things were more like a little bit more like a creative element added in. It was more than that because we did it every week. But so I started bringing some of that back in, and then I like started bringing that cross that was back here in a lot of videos and bringing it in. And then I would bring the candle that I was using in my podcast. I was like lighting a candle. And then I would, as things grew, we ended up getting like a old table. And when we got down in this basement, it was like, let's put the table in the middle with the cross and the candle. And let's put a Bible on the table. And then all of a sudden, like, the lectors over here and the songs leaders over here. And I started having like one of the kids, like light the candle when the service was starting, like having like an acolyte, like, and we started just doing, but it was in a basement. Like how sacred can you get in a basement? And I mean, I was trying to hold this like high level, but it, and then the liturgy, let's do, one of the things, it was kind of a creative process. It was highly creative, but the whole thing about it, the creative aspect for me was like, how far back can I take this? That's the interesting thing, is not like how far forward, but how far back can I take this within the context? At the same time, we have a sweet lady from our church that was coming during that time, and she had gone her and her husband had gone, her kids were in our youth group whenever me and my wife led youth many years ago. And they had gotten that situation was terrible that had happened at our church, and they come on Sunday and they text me and my wife earlier in the week, like, can y'all play Oceans this week? Could y'all play Oceans? And I was like, okay. So it's like not a, and we did. And what happened that Sunday was really interesting is the power went out while we were singing that song. And the only thing that was, had an acoustic guitar, and then the candle was still lit right next to the cross. And that was like all you could see. And then we were singing one of the most popular songs that had taken place in like the last decade and a half or so. And so a lot of people knew the melody and just kept singing. And I was having a conversation with a friend about orthodoxy just this week. And he was saying, the layers of the garments of skin that you put on with the technology and the machine and all that kind of stuff, it's like, you can't do this thing unless you have the garments or whatever. Like, I was like, well, that's really interesting, because when everything got like peeled away in that situation, because something had been so, within that tradition had been so mimetically powerful, but because we also had this little candle, like these things were able to exist without any other thing. And I think that that's something powerful about liturgy when it's in your bones, is about how something can exist, or even without the machine, like through time. But when we get so dependent upon many aspects of the machine, like, well, we can't have, say your power's out at your church building, your sanctuary. It's like, well, we can't even have church this week because we can't even do it. We were going to play 2 new songs. Nobody knew. We were going to, we don't even have like I don't know. We can't put all those things. That was like a really interesting idea for me, was like, how dependent are you on this to where you would just be completely like, we can't even make this work without. And some of that comes with scale. Like, well, we scaled this thing because we have, we can have like low security, low trust children's ministry because we have background checks and the scanning systems and all this stuff. It's like, people don't even have to know people. You just show up and drop your kids off. But if you're like a church of like 100 people, like, do you need a security scanner for your kid, ministry? Because it's like, that goes back to your point, Ethan, about the Eucharist too. Is like, it's like 2 new people have showed up this week. Like, do you need name tags? I don't know. That's just the stuff that's going through my brain. I don't know if that answered your question, Ethan, but that was kind of part of the story.
Yeah, that just made me think, Christian, like, what would happen to all of us if the internet went down tomorrow and never came back on? Yeah. It's like, how much of our interaction in this little corner have we internalized so that we would be able to live it out, if we didn't have this online community. And I think to me, I see this in myself, like this instinct to be bringing like kind of the fruit of what I've learned back into my, back into meat space. Like with people I have relationship with, and figure out how do I connect, these ideas with where the people are at, in my community. Where do I find those points of engagement, those points of similarity? I feel like that mentally, that's kind of where I am. Like, that's really what I've been trying to focus on. And it's kind of like that, like me feeling that need to make that move, like kind of in the hero's journey. It's like coming back into the community, right? After that exploratory phase. It's another reason why I just felt like, going to Midwestuary. I mean, both, it was like the timing wasn't right, but also I'm like, that's just, anyway, I think let's say what God wants me to do right now is to be strengthening those connections with the people I live around. And I think that's what, honestly, that's what Ross Byrd is getting at in the Parish Manifesto. Is it's like, it's such a low tech, relational, community centric vision of the church that like you're saying, Christian, his version of church would work if you didn't have power. Everyone could just walk to their parish church building. If it's dark, bring candles, sing these hymns you all know, or even worship songs that
Yep.
you all grew up listening to, that you all know. You have the same reference point. It's kind of like a simple service, or maybe a liturgy that's been internalized so people know, that
Yep.
flow. And yeah, like you're saying, you don't have to have a fancy computer that'll spit out name tags for your kids to be able to check them in for kids church. It's like you just trust, the people who are watching your kids because, they live in the neighborhood down the street, and, you trust them.
Or you've been at church with them for, a long time.
Exactly.
Yeah. Like part of
It's
the
high
whole,
trust.
part of the whole, when you were talking about the frictionless nature, is like Bitcoin, the idea is trustless. That's the idea of Bitcoin, is trustless.
Or trust the system.
Trustless. Like there's no trust needed.
The process.
Yeah, like because
you trust the blockchain.
Yeah,
it's pure verification.
Yeah, but that's the machine doing it all. I'm saying, like, and in a sense, being able to go into that really for low friction church, it's like the amount of trust needed with the security system, and that's all trying to like be less necessity of trust, actually. And it's actually a kind of a big problem, because then it's like
machine.
Yeah, because then you trust
two-sided coin.
Yeah, because then you don't. Do I need to trust the pastor? Or does he just need to give me my content download? And so, the things like that start to take place. But the part you were talking about, which part was it? It got my wheels turning. You said, what was the two things? The thing that Ross was. What were the two things you kind of brought out in that just now, Luke?
I mean, like church without electricity.
Yeah.
It's Lindy Church. It's durable. It's anti-fragile.
Yeah, I mean, and to me, the image I have is like a kernel and a husk. And it's like, what happens when the husk is removed? Kind of like that image came to mind when you were talking about garments of skin. Like, technology is our garment of skin. It's, it's like increasing our power, and, it, in some ways it can help grow that little kernel, inside the husk. But what happens when the husk is burnt away? What's inside? Which I've honestly been thinking about that a lot in terms of, Christ talking about cutting the dead branches, pruning, right? It's like those dead branches. Oh, dude, okay.
You're a farmer.
Can you guys allow me just to like expand on this horticultural metaphor?
Do it, please.
Okay, so Ross, and a lot of this is inspired by Ross and how he's talked about like roots and fruit, which I think is like a really helpful way to think about things, which is that right, what technology does. Let's just look at the internet, information technology. It allows us to like grow really big fruit really fast, right? Like it expands our power. We can reach a lot of people, especially with AI tools. It's like you could just generate so much content all the time with AI. Okay, so it's like all this fruit. But what about the roots? And another phenomenon is just looking at all these influencers, thinking they have a great life. Hey, I could do that. It looks easy. This guy built an app in 2 hours with AI. I could do that. And what you don't see is like the roots that went into, it's like the context, or that person's background in in the app example, it's like that person's background in computer engineering. He went to school for 4 years, for 6 years, has all this background, and then he's able to leverage these tools to do the thing. So just as a normal person, you can't just pick the fruit. But okay, so that's the kind of the roots and fruit, right? Which is that, ideally, like these practices, like let's say wisdom or like apprenticing, to actually be skilled, to know something deeply, it is growing roots, which it might not look like you're being productive for a while, but you're growing those roots that will then, feed the plant, grow the plant to produce the fruit, right? That's like a much more slow, organic, kind of high friction way of learning things. And so like what I was kind of thinking about with the image of the kernel and the husk, or the idea of, pruning the vine, is I think there's a way in which, like, these tools we're talking about, say like these tools for mass communication, tools, information technology, internet, whatever, us being able to learn all these things. Okay, that's fantastic. That can like really grow the plant. Maybe you can grow all this fruit. Are you growing your roots? Are you rooted somewhere? Are you rooted in your community, rooted in relationships,
Rooted in history?
Rooted in history? Because what happens, like, you see this in conventional ag, where they rely on chemical fertilizers and they're not feeding the soil to grow the roots, is once you take away that chemical fertilizer, that plant has not developed the roots to be able to mine the nutrients out of the soil. That plant is being spoon fed. Like, it has a very shallow root system because it's getting the nutrients it needs in a very like easily digestible format just when it needs it, and so in time of stress, or if that chemical fertilizer is taken away, that plant will die. and I think so, this whole metaphor of like Christ pruning, throwing, the branches into the fire, to me, it makes me think of, so like, if we look at ourselves, are we rooted? Like what happens when that that external stimulant, or this technology, these garments of skin, are taken away? What happens to us as a plant? Are we rooted? Can we support all this growth that we felt? Like, is this coming from within, or are we just responding to the stimulant, that we intake, on a daily basis,
Well, the thing that was
through the internet?
the two things is like, what in the metaphor, what is the soil in the metaphor? Because like, I agree with you, being put like as the seed goes down and it has to take root, like, what is it taking root in? Like, and then it also was making me think of like Paul's metaphor of meat and milk, like of spiritual growth, like, and then the experience that I had was like something being able to be nurtured in a space, like in a womb, in fertile soil, and again, like maybe more naturally fertilized soil, not like mechanically or industrialized fertilized soil, like,
Yeah.
And I mean, it's a really interesting question. The thing I was trying to remember a few minutes ago was like, how do we take all the TLC-ness into the world? How do you influence? And I was kind of like, Ross has an interesting influence on what he's able to do, because he has he has his MDiv actually, and he actually teaches in his off season. Like, he's done like teaching in a, so he gets to like, expand his ideas into young people or people that are interested through that kind of. And then he also has worked adjacent at his church. And one of the things I'm able to like take some of this and like put it into practice, because like, I mean, I do have an undergrad in biblical studies, but I was, worked at a church, and now I'm like part of this church thing. And so what I was kind of thinking, I thought about this like 2 or 3 weeks ago. I was like, everyone in TLC just needs to go to seminary. I don't even know, like, I was
No,
just
I 100%. Well, not 100% agree with you, but like,
it would solve a
it's
lot
a
of
great
problems.
place to. It's designed to deconstruct. It's to handle your deconstruction. I think half of the problem is 20 years ago we didn't have enough of that being drawn into the life of the church.
And there was, well, I mean, we have a shortage of ministers everywhere. But the other piece of, because like kids aren't getting inspired to go be like, I could never be Stephen Furtick. I can't be Elevation's worship leader. Like, like I can just be a, like kids aren't being like, they don't look at the pastor in the parish where they'd be like, man, maybe someday I could be like Father so and so or Reverend so and so. It's like, yeah, that seems realistic, and instead you have to be like a wild entrepreneur, like with incredible charisma. You're like, okay, I never want to do that. It's but the piece there, that's one is, but the other piece is because then it gives you quote unquote authority. It gives you a voice that and like, I'm not talking about quit your job, but like, you could get an MDiv in 5 years, like depending on like, and then the part that's Matt, you were talking about it deconstructing. It's almost all the idealism that floats through the space. It would put it like smack dab against reality, in a kind of way. But there would be so many good things that you could even bring into your seminary and like, you would have so many great questions and get involved in so many great conversations in a different space that kind of gets out of the mechanistic treadmill and, or the churning treadmill in a kind of way. But yeah, that was the thought that I had the other day, and still one that I'm kind of like toying with myself and on that level. But that was a thought. I was like, man, all these people just need to go to seminary. It's just
Does that, you were asking what the soil is, does that feel like growing roots to you, Christian? Like that idea of going to seminary, encountering reality, does that feel like a planting? Or maybe leading a church community, does that feel like growing roots? I'm just
maybe not even leading, but just the being in one. Like you have to be like, seed can't, like, what is it, the rocky ground, the shallow ground, like all of the stuff, since we're in this metaphor, is like the seed has to be in a nurturing soil. So I don't know, and seminary would be like a nurture to a degree. You could be considered nurturing. Ethan, you haven't talked.
Matt's got his hand up. Matt's got stuff.
I was going to say, thinking back on my own experience at seminary, like looking at the divide between seminary and ministry. I think a decent way of thinking of the two is seminary is a place that is roots focused, and I think ministry is a place that is fruits focused.
Ooh,
the two are connected. You like that rhyme? Yeah.
no, that's good. That's good.
Preach that sermon. What's the third point?
Right. And but again, like those two things are intertwined. You can't separate the one from the other. One of the big things that seminary did is like turn me from just a raw non-denom evangelical and began to open up my eyes to the fact that no, there is a wider tradition in which I stand, and a lot of that was sort of like a lot of my time was spent kind of exploring what does it mean to be this, and what are all the different things that are kind of feeding into me. Kind of like something that Luke's been getting at a lot is those people that are living through you even though you're gone. What are those influences that are still, because you are part of this group, this community, who's still having an effect on the world because they're part of your heritage? And those are both good actors and bad actors, and you've got to kind of reckon with both. And I think one of the reasons we're so frustrated is because if we're so historically blind, then those bad actors are also going to continue to work their way through us, so don't figure out a way to put them to rest.
And that I would also add, just as this pitch of making like the seminary pitch, is not because you think you're gonna, like, the model is like, go to seminary so I can be this entrepreneurial successful XY. No, just go to seminary so you can be like a badass parishioner, associate, resource, maybe at some point, some form of pastor. Like, it doesn't have to be so I can be successful pastor X, Y, and Z. Like I don't know. That's part of, because like you were saying, Matt, it like brings you in. Like, did you finish? Are you still in? Like, what's your, I don't know your story.
Yeah, no, I know. I got my MDiv 10 years ago.
Okay.
But another part of my story is also 10 years ago, which is also still in the boom of like church planting world. And I just very clearly saw it midway through. Like, I definitely felt called to be here, and it continued to make sense, even though the more kind of looked at the sort of like the sort of the images for what you're supposed to do once you leave. And I just could not see myself in any of those. Like, yeah, no, I'm not, like, I do not have it in me to be that entrepreneurial, like church planting, hyper extrovert kind of guy. And so like a lot of my time there was sort of reckoning with like, I'm pretty sure I'm supposed to be here, but I'm not sure any of you guys know what I'm supposed to be doing with this once I'm done, because all of your options seem terrible to me.
Yeah, because they all are exponential. It's all about scale. Like you go through and you get all this like great information and teaching and encouragement and this community of the people that you're, and then all of a sudden it's like, all right, now you've got to do church growth metrics. Good luck. It's like a completely different mechanism, and it's not in to the one of the reasons that I think Ross's manifesto is so Parish Manifesto is so powerful is because like that's it, you know, it's very organic in that way. And I think that we're looking, you know, my brother is 10 years, I just turned 40, he'll be 30 this year. He's 10 years younger than me. And when he moved back to Central Arkansas from Fort Worth, they wanted to go to a church. They wanted to find a church that wasn't 2 services. That was like one of their criteria. Like, so you're not going to get the one that's trying to scale hardcore, because the whole point of going to 2 services is like, all right, now we can double in size. Now we can hire another blah, 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 and we can buy this thing. And it's like, you know, not that sometimes that happens even if you're not quote unquote trying, but I just found that that was like an impulse to him. I had my brother-in-law, he's in seminary, and he was working at a megachurch in Nashville, and he wanted to go to one of the satellite campuses because he actually didn't like working in the megachurch. You know, he's a few years over 30. And so, I mean, I'm looking at these people that are younger than me. Like I was like all in on like, I want to be at quote unquote church success. Like I want that. And all these people are like, you know, I don't see the, I guess I'm seeing the end game of what all these guys were hoping for, and it ain't what I want.
One of the important things about looking at like the fruit context is every now and again, if you look at something that's just really, really terrible that happens, it should kind of call into question what we've been feeding our roots. I'm just thinking of like normal pastor stuff, like the 3 service phenomenon. I've got like a buddy of mine is dealing with who's a pastor, and I wouldn't call his church like a megachurch, but it is popular enough in the town that it does have 2 or 3 services. And they had like normal pastor stuff, like grief hits your community. And he was just talking about how he had to give the same somber, reflective, kind of contextualizing this terrible event that happened to the community 3 times in the span of 4 hours. And he's just like, it almost doesn't mean anything by the 3rd service. And there's a certain point where the scale just rips the humanity right out of you.
Man, you know what's interesting about that? It probably would have been better if he did the first one live and they recorded it and shared it with the next 2 services for his
like
own,
I said,
for his
they're
own
not
sake.
megachurch, so they don't operate that way.
But you hear what I'm saying? Like it actually, that
Yes.
would have been a better use of technology of scale. Well, I'm saying,
I mean, this is sort of there's like a lose-lose situation.
I agree.
Like, even though he's dead inside, like you have to deliver that news personally. Like they don't telecast it all, so that would have been awful. But like, no. If you're like a satellite thing, that's the moment where your campus pastor steps forward and lets the folks know what happened.
Yeah. Anyways, yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, it's funny because so much of this I haven't like thought about in a number of years, but these were all the conversations we'd have in megachurch land. And I was auditing seminary while working in a megachurch, but we would talk about roots all the time as like a staff because we knew we were rootless, like, and we knew that we were watching people that would come into a megachurch and be there for a few years and then want to get more rooted. And so we were always trying to like design resources or like, hey, can we have a program within a program for the people who need roots? And it was always like pulling teeth to get any money towards anything that was actually about roots. But the other thing that has struck me listening is this last Sunday when we were at the Anglican church, but the one thing that I really missed or like wanted that didn't exist there is we were singing to an organ. And I was like, this organ's so loud. It's really cool in like the beginning and the ending, but like trying to sing to an organ, I'm not a good singer. I just can't do it. I can't hit these notes. I can't hear people around me to know where my voice should be on the music scale. I was like, can we just please have a guitar or piano? And I realized I was having this whole conversation to me, roots and fruits. I'm like, I want to have one arm like stretching off into the future and using some of this modern technology for good, but I also want another arm like reaching back into the past. And like, I don't know, like, is it too much to ask to be future and past oriented here in this present moment? Because I think that's some of what I'm hearing in the Parish Manifesto is we're going to have the best of the past and we're still going to reach into the future, but we're going to turn this present moment into something sacred.
It's funny.
That's what a tradition is, dude. It is those three temporal horizons at the same time.
Let me get there. I'm only 33 years old, okay? So I'm the young whippersnapper here. I'll get there when I get there.
I was going
to be fair, we're all more or less evangelical coded, and so it took me like 10 years of reading on my own to learn that. But
the funny thing about that experience, Ethan. So we moved into this building. It's got like $1 million organ that nobody knows how to play, and it's like known in our little town. Like, hey, the best organ in town is in this building. They do like recitals here from the local college and stuff. And I was just like, we got to find an organ player. But the way that it made sense to me liturgically was exactly what you just said, which is exactly what we do. I actually use a Spotify playlist right now because I'm in the hopes and in faith that we will have an organist for prelude and postlude and for the passing of the peace, actually. And so I have a playlist where we do people are signaled through the psychotechnology of prelude that to find your seat with the organ. And then we have like a little processional. It's not very formal, but and it's usually has been done by a piano and a violin. But the song that we do there is like an old timey contemporary worship song, like "Here I Am to Worship" or "How Great Is Our God," and after that, after the call to worship, I do like a pretty modern song on acoustic guitar. And because it's what people know, like that is the folk voice of the evangelical time. You know, it's like and it's in that frame. And that's honestly I would be like betraying myself if I was trying to do like a choir, like for the sake of tradition. Christian leads a choir like every song. It's like that's not even barely inside of me. You know, I have a little bit of training, but like I don't know. That's funny that you mentioned like there was an aesthetic there that felt like interesting and ancient, but there was also a part of you for participation's sake was difficult. You know, not to say that in a certain way, maybe you could learn to get better at singing in that. It would take time, years, or a year or so.
But also, what you just said, like, that's not exclusive to organs. I feel that in my own kind of like stadium rock evangelical church worship service all the time. The lights are down, like the only kind of audio input is from the speakers from the stage. I can't modulate with the folks around me because I can't hear them. And every now and again I look around and I'm like, I'm not sure these people are singing.
Yep.
Like some of them are. But the other part of it is the folks at the stage leading worship don't seem to care whether we sing or not. They don't trust us to sing.
Yeah. That's the thing. There's the whole idea is to remove self-consciousness. And like you were saying, like the lights are low. The whole idea for that was to like hyper individualize. That's like it's the impulse, whether they realize that's what they want or not. It's what you want. It's for people not to feel self-conscious around other people in that setting. It's different in like charismania, but the other side of that is, you know, when you're having to attend to the modern worship frame, you have to do all this acoustic treatment if you're going to have like live drums and you want the bass to be crisp and everything. But at the same time, what that will do is that it completely absorbs the human voice. So it's like that space is not designed actually for singing. It's designed for the production of, pop music or rock ensemble and of performance. And of course, the worship leaders want everyone engaged and just into it, but like in a certain sense, it's antithetical to the voice, like right now in our building, it's all hard. There's brick floors. It's this huge dome-ish, hard surfaces, and there's no acoustic treatment because it was designed for speaking, like the no speaker system that's installed. It was designed for the old school dais that preachers would stand on that have like the weird dome on top. That dome is designed to shoot the audio out, like the voice out. And then like like in a big cathedral, like the voices are able to, which it's not a cathedral, but the voices are able to be like the singing is the speaking actually has been the more difficult part in that space, is like for the preaching to be clear actually versus the singing to be resonant. That's been interesting.
Yeah, what I'm thinking about is technology for broadcast versus technology for participation.
There you go.
I think this is what we're dealing with, because I mean, this is why engaging with this as an evangelical has become really fun for me, because it's making me see that like the organ in its day was a new technology that probably like really threw people off. You have to imagine there was a conservative faction among Lutherans who thought the pipe organ was antithetical to authentic Christian worship. Like,
yep,
how dare you bring this monstrosity into this sacred space, right? I mean, there had to have been. They just, they're dead now, and we have organs. And the same thing, Christian, what you're talking about, the dome, that is a technology for broadcast.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? It's just that's the technology they had. I think the problem that we experience, we're feeling, is for whatever reason the evangelical megachurch has become so reliant on technology of broadcast that it's kind of forgotten that technology is a participation.
Yeah.
Or there's just like an improper balance. Like it's all broadcast, and so as a congregant, you're just passive. Which I think it went down easy because in post-war America, everyone was taught to be just a passive recipient of propaganda, more or less. Sit in front of the TV, eat the TV dinner, whatever. And you can tell where my mind's at. But I think that kind of passive consumer mindset in post-war America just got incorporated into evangelical megachurch, and it just kind of adopted that technology of broadcast. And so for folks like us, I think that's why the TLC has been so meaningful for us, because it's a way, like, to break the fourth wall and participate in a media that previously had been for broadcast, like we are subverting the broadcast technology to participate in the broadcast technology.
And to me, that's
learning to participate again.
That's the better place for it than in church, honestly, if we're going to scale, like what, to that point about the emphasis of like, so if the preacher is up there and his main thought is like, I want this to be able to be broadcast well, it's going to be at the expense of the people that are there actually in the participation. And the other piece of it is, like even all the technology, like we're saying, the expense is like, we're focused on how this can be translated digitally more than we're focused on how, but the other word is the liturgy is like, one definition is called the work of the people.
Right.
Like that's actually the definition. So it's like, that participation as telos versus, reach as telos, and I think that's part of the issue that has come up again and again. Is like the evangelical telos is reach, good news, great commission, whatever you want to call it, like that. It not actually like Christian formation, like, or participation
also known as
in the
growing
Christian.
roots.
What is growing roots?
Formation as growing roots
Versus
the
reach.
harvest. It's all on the harvest. It's all on the fruit. The reach is the fruit. It's harvesting, as opposed to formation would be roots.
Yeah,
Anyway,
yeah, I see. Yeah, there's just kind of like one's more industrial and one's more, or backyard garden.
yeah. So, but I think about liturgies, like even in say like Catholic liturgy, there is a point during the homily where it's broadcast. So it's not like a liturgy is only participatory. Like there's a back and forth. Like I think that's the deal. Like the liturgy is just what we do together, in the context of our church community. I just think for evangelicals, our evangelical liturgy has been passive recipients to something being broadcast to us. Or maybe we have this, like, as an individual, we, in our own heads, we are participating, right? Like a worship experience, which can be meaningful. And I'm not going to dismiss it. I mean, I have meaningful worship experiences, but it's very much like, it's a thing out there and it's in my head, like that participation as a congregation is not as cultivated, with the exception of like the small group, which is where like you learn to participate kind of, and I don't know. It depends on how well that's done. It can be done well. It can also be done like in a formulaic way where you're just kind of,
I got community.
Saying the pat answers. Yeah, exactly.
So confession time for small group. There was a moment in a small group recently where somebody said, or I know we were talking about, basically somebody made the comment that like heaven starts now, and like this is like we get a little taste of heaven now. It's what we've been doing for the last hour, and I immediately just had this like, I thought not of scripture but of Nietzsche talking about the eternal occurrence, so the fact that you have to repeat this moment eternally, and I'm like, I have to leave. I have to go. I want to practice this.
Was that more of a vision of hell for you than a vision of heaven? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. That's the demon saying you're gonna have to do this forever and forever and forever. Like, no.
You're like, I don't think I'm a Christian
recently.
anymore.
I don't know. Just not a good small group member. But they've been aware of this for a very long time.
That's kind of good if it's been for a long time. If they were like, there's a certain knownness that they have of you, maybe they don't know this. They don't know this Matt Skankenstein, maybe. But the thing that this was bringing about to me whenever Luke was talking was recently Ross. I don't know who he responded to on somebody's Substack. Maybe been Paul or something, but he said. The waves have been built in, temptation to swing the pendulum from what I call the religion of heaven, Gnostic, to the religion of earth, pagan, and then back again, from the temptation of disembodiment to the temptation towards over-embodiment and vice versa. And I think that he's pointing at kind of, the critiques of like something like orthodoxy is that it's way more pagan, or, parts, that your idols and saints are idols and these things. And then it's like, no, the pure thing relics. The pure thing is a pure faith that is devoid of everything. And then you get to this more Gnostic, like, it's just in my head, like, and Paul calls it heads on sticks. And I said something like, well, then you also have the problem of bodies on sticks, of like just total embodiment. Like, and I was like, so,
or sexual organs on sticks is more like it, but
well, yeah, but you can see like that impulse towards embodiment, like then, and then that's what is so. I think if the theology of Christ's incarnation and the image of the cross is so much right in right in the middle of this. Like that's how Christianity is actually most true, is when you can kind of, and and I would encourage though the participation of Eucharist often, so that you can, if you can, like, because that's in that moment where that's happening, that's present, that you're able to either symbolically think about it or participate in it, theologically, actually, or however you want to, where you want to play that game. But I think that is part of what we're dealing with, is like at all the time, maybe, is like this, what did he call it? A religion of heaven versus the religion of earth. And if you're in the religion of heaven too, it's all about escapism. Like, I can't wait till Christ comes back and I'm raptured, or when we all get to heaven, what a place that will be when we all get to, it's like, what about like your 80 years, like, what do we do with that? We're just holding on till the rapture. We're just holding on till we get through. And you can understand where some of that comes from, like Great Depression, slavery. It's like, this, you want to escape the suffering. Like, and I get that, where some of that stuff was like, it comes from, but like, anyways, those were some of those thoughts on the what do you call the broadcast versus participation?
Yeah, it's funny because I remember when I went to seminary and like learned a lot about like Gnosticism, I went, oh, like my church is Gnostic. They're like it's Gnostic theology. And I was like, oh my gosh, now I'm like a secret agent now. I gotta like redeem this thing from the inside. But I mean, that is what it was. Is like, okay, like you follow Jesus now, and then your soul goes to heaven. And look, we didn't even talk about like bodily resurrection, which is like, it's like fairly upfront in the scriptures. Like it's like a pretty big deal.
It's probably more a big deal than the rapture.
Yeah, it's literally insane how that is never talked about.
Why do y'all think? I mean, do you think that? Why do you think the impulse was to? It's obviously a reaction, part of the protest, because that's in the bones of it too. Of idolatry.
I think it's just a trajectory we inherited that keeps moving further and further along, and we don't have quite as many kind of like self-corrective things because of the lack of roots. So if we're so present focused, and we don't have like things like creeds and whatnot to draw us back to that specific thing every day, and we have to ask like, oh, why do we make a big point of like bodily resurrection? Then we don't have something that's gonna self-correct, so we're gonna keep moving down that trajectory, unaware of how much we're drifting.
Are you about to say something, Ethan?
Well, I was going to ask, do you think culture is on a similarly Gnostic path, like American culture? Or do you see that as a different sort of, because I mean, certainly there's plenty of the, sexual organs on stick path, right? Like up front and center within like contemporary American culture. Like even if you were just to like watch the Oscars, there'd be plenty of like clothes. You would go like, well, where's the clothes at? Right? Like there's no clothes. So I'm always, because in so many ways in megachurch land, we were just adopting popular American culture. And so I'm always curious how much like the heart of evangelicalism to me seems very tied into the heart of whatever America is and where America is going. I mean, but granted, that's discounting what is now, I believe, a pretty global movement with all kinds of evangelical hotspots around the globe.
Yeah, my thought on it is what we're seeing is two sides of the same coin. So like when you have a kingdom of heaven here and a kingdom of earth here. So I think American culture is like stuck in this frame where those two things are split. And so I think what happens is, the sexual organs on sticks reinforce the Gnostic instinct of the evangelical church as in opposition to the kind of Epicurean lifestyle, right? A lifestyle of sensual pleasure. So then you invest, all your hope in this heaven that is detached from the body, because you see all these people focusing their entire meaning, worth in pleasure of the body. But I think the brilliant thing you talked about, Christian, I think about this all the time. Christ stretched out on the cross is those two things come together in this tension that is literally pulling Christ apart on the cross. He is experiencing that in his body. That union of heaven and earth, that tension comes together. And I think, so to me, it's like the solution is that living in that tension. There are these two things that seem diametrically opposed that come together in Christ. But yeah, there's something about, I don't know if you could like link it back to like Cartesian dualism or what, but I think to me, I don't know. I kind of have a mental model right now, which is like technology drives culture, culture drives religion. It's kind of how I'm thinking about it, because I mean, you see the postmoderns, like I've really been interested in learning much more about so like Lacan, Bataille, and then Nietzsche. And it's just so fascinating how these like French postmoderns, two are these French postmoderns are relying on Freud and Nietzsche to kind of explore the sensual, or like what the marginalized that's kind of excluded. And a lot of that has to do with, like in Bataille's case, like excrement, violence, sensuality. So it's kind of it's playing with that dichotomy. And so I think that's what we're seeing that in American culture, where I think you see like in kind of modern, like let's say postmodern progressivism, and overemphasis in that like the bodily, which had been kind of excluded in let's say like post-war Christianity.
Not only post-war, but like Puritanism.
Yeah, Puritan. Yeah, it goes farther. Yeah, it goes way farther.
We are playing with so many broad tropes that I think won't stand up to like a modicum of historical scrutiny. There's certain things that carry like deep like symbolic value. Puritans, Gnosticism, Cartesianism. I feel like all these things are they're memes at this point. Sorry, I got to point that out every now and again.
That's true, but that's how we ultimately communicate, unless we're at like a high scholastic level. But I think the thing about it, because I was talking to my mom, so she was the youngest of a family of 6, and I think her oldest sister is like 13 or 14 years older than her, and she was born in 1961. And so she was talking about like at her high school, the high school that her sisters went to, they still had pretty much like almost a Catholic school dress code at the public school. And then the Cultural Revolution took place. And by the time my mom was in high school, she was like wearing bell bottoms and like, t-shirt, like her senior year or whatever. And I was like, why did the culture snap against tradition? Like, why did it just break? Because it just, Paul and Mark talk about that, like everyone just rejected tradition. Vatican II, it's just like there was just like a complete, the Jesus movement, like it just like the whole culture broke over this like tradition that was trying to hold. And I was just like, what? Because we can't like go back, this group of people, we can't go back to that time to understand. And now I think the Gen Zs are really asking that question, like, where did it go? Where did everything go? They can't even recognize the 90s. Like, and so the those memes of stuff are helpful because it's like I could see, because the Puritans were so anti this world, you know, and iconography, all the things, you know, and it does just kind of like end up in your head, and out of that movement, then you do get like the restorationists and the kind of low church stuff, and which has impacted all of this as well. And we can talk about, there's all sorts of things, but I do think that there's something to that, that Luke, what you were talking about, the coin and incarnation and the religion of heaven, the religion of earth, where there was a rejection of, you know, the religion of heaven. Well, I don't know if that's true either. I just know that you were talking like the pleasure, you don't think about tradition or your Catholic grandma or your Baptist grandma, like every point of pleasure, like, is just completely, there's not a good relationship with it. There's not a redemptive idea around pleasure. There, like, feasting is pleasure, and it could also be good, like a food, but then it's like you get to the part of pleasure with food, and it's, you know, sin, and you can line that up with sex, you can line that up with everything. But it was almost like we can't even just acknowledge pleasure in anything. You know, food, sex, drink, whatever. There's like we can't create a category of pleasure because we just have to abstain from everything, and then we'll get to heaven or something. You know, like, I don't know.
Oh,
You
like
know,
the pleasure
like,
is almost like deferred until
yeah.
heaven.
And
I mean,
you think about like Jesus at Canaan, and he was always having dinner at people's house, and and what is that, you know, what is that part of the religion of earth or whatever it was, like, of being here and enjoying good drink and song, and how does that relate to the incarnation or to the good meal and those types of things, I think are, and Peugeot has been helpful in me, like, thinking about concentric fractals related to, it's okay to have a sacred meal, and it's okay to have like a more common meal, and the meal in your house is also a type of a meal. It's not as sacred as the meal at worship, but then, like, what about the meal with you by yourself at work, you know, in the break room? Like, that's also, you know, they're not the same, but they are representations of, there's like the higher teleology of that, and to be able to frame those things as all kind of like together, and there's a place for the feast that is a little more rowdy. There's even a place for the rock concert on a Friday night, like, and that was what I experienced at Symbolic World, was when Neil deGrasse does his concert with Dirt Poor Robins, him and Kate, and it's like rock concert Friday night, and then they all went to Divine Liturgy on Sunday. I was like, there's a place, like, but we're trying to like put, I don't know. Those are part of the things around all of that has spun for me.
Yeah, I was kind of gonna let Matt talk. Matt, if you had.
Let me recollect my thoughts. Takes me into switch from listening mode to talking mode here.
Yeah. Okay. Well, while you're talking, sorry, thinking about talking, what that sparked in me, Christian, was that I think in like the pre-modern, let's say, like, liturgical calendar, there are times of feasting and times of fasting, you know, which, like, you know, a lot of that I'm getting from kind of Charles Taylor, Secular Age. There's something about secular modernity that is like escaping that kind of like secular repetitive in and out of feasting and fasting, that I think something about that inspires someone to kind of go all in on the Gnosticism or all in the hedonism. Does that make sense? Because I think in, let's say, pre-modern, you know, traditional religious communities, there were certain times as a community where you would feast together, and experience bodily pleasure together in a sacred way because it was pointed towards the
Mhm.
higher. And you
Yep.
would also have periods of time of, asceticism where you denied the body for religious purposes. And I think there's something about that being broken that then we get these weird expressions of this in kind of like our marketplace of ideas where you have like on a personal level, like intermittent fasting to deprive the body. So it's like we have these impulses, but they've been detached from like a community centric,
It's
say like
individualized. Individualized.
they
You do
become
you.
individualized.
Mhm.
And so
Yeah.
I think to me, like just relating all this back to Parish Manifesto, I think what Ross is pointing towards is going from like this marketplace of individuals to community centric, where as a community we have these patterns of activity that connect us with each other and connect us to the divine. Because I think these are all impulses in us, and without being kind of like bound in a community, these impulses can just kind of go off in all different directions.
Yeah. And
Does that make
maybe the interesting thing about Ross is if like, and the question of, it's like, well, then just go back to the ancient church. There's your answer. And it's like, is that really like, or is there like, because, it's funny how these things, what was it? I don't know if it was who the Reformed guy that was putting out a critique against Comer last week or two on Substack. I can't remember, but
Was that Ann Arbor?
no, it was Kevin DeYoung.
Oh, okay.
And like it's like, all right, well now it's like, be careful,
is Comer the new Rob Bell kind of thing?
He's the new Richard Foster, the new Dallas Willard.
The new Dallas Willard, yeah.
That's more really the frame is the evangelical mystic in the embodied practices.
But yeah, in terms of how the community is responding to him, because I mean, Dallas Willard, was he opposed in a similar way?
Probably. I mean, you could see.
Yes, yeah.
He was
by fundies,
okay.
Absolutely.
Oh, by fundies, okay.
Yeah. But anyone who inherits that fundamentalist strain, like, there's a lot of there's way too much woo in Willard.
Yeah, and Willard was too much of a philosopher, I would imagine, for fundies.
And so the question then is, like, because everyone, like, what are you trying to protect? You're trying to protect your individual parishioner, but the individual parishioner would automatically be protected if he was a part of a communal pattern of those things. I think, and the thing is like, well, don't get too mystical on your own. Instead of us, well, we have mysticism in our pattern, but we also have like kind of guardrails in our tradition, say you're in the Reformed tradition. And so the interesting thing though, that I'm trying, I think, to point at is with Ross is an invitation to look at these things and reincorporate them in the way that evangelicalism can through its porous, quick movement. But it is at the cost of certain things. Like, you have to reorient your telos ultimately. And I think that's going to be hard because everyone has this problem though. It's not like Catholicism doesn't have temptations with power and influence. Like it's not like evangelicalism doesn't have temptations with power and influence. I mean, it's very but there I think a desire for a type of localism to walk through these things together and is what probably we are longing for, even across generations. I don't know if that took us anywhere.
Drawn back to the Parish Manifesto. It's important to note that I guess, like, aside from whatever patterns Ross has been able to instantiate in his life and his parish, which seems to be substantial, I would love to see it someday, just to kind of like see this put into practice. like this is a really frustrating kind of conversation. Like, how do we start to do this? Because this isn't an individual project; it's a community project. It's I mean, this takes into account like radical ecological critiques of things like the car and your work and where you choose to work. And it's
Yes.
I am all for it, but at the same in trying to do it, but it's in my own kind of like way. But that's purely an individual project of trying to find a life that operates at the scale of a human being. But it's sort of like, it's a cool idea, bro, but like the environment is rebelling against all of this.
Yeah.
I think we were
Yeah.
talking, Kristen, you asked the question, like, how do we just like reject tradition wholesale? I don't think any of us are ever going to be in a position to understand what World War II was and did. Just like how much of, you know, whatever the 60s was, his reaction to what the 50s was, his reaction to whatever happened to an entire generation over in Europe over here. But after coming back, there is this invention of the suburbs, there is the invention of the highways, and there's this process of creating structures that allow smoother, frictionless exits from the community that you're stuck inside of. And there's this idea I read in an article a long time ago about how if you go back to like much older kind of like ancient kind of like hunter-gatherer like artifacts, you look at the very few things that they carry because they're mobile and nomadic. Every object that they have has it's a multi-use thing. And they use this idea of like every kind of like artifact is condensed. It's got a number of different things. It's got secular, it's got religious uses to it. And in one sense, one of the things that modernity does is it decondenses. It takes one of the functions out of that and finds a specialized way to apply it elsewhere. And I think it's a pretty good kind of like understanding of everything Silicon Valley does. Let's decondense this and this and this. And the problem is, I think culturally, once you decondense something, I don't know how to recombine anything.
Yeah, well, that's that. Peugeot recently had a conversation about music, and they talked about music is compression, you know, like of ideas. But I would also go further and say that our worship is a compression of the transcendent, in a type of way. And whenever, to that point, like when we you use the word condense, I'm substituting the word compression. We compress these elements. We are like stripping away meaning layer by layer by layer, because it's like this, you know, totem or rock or tool or whatever, this cross, like maybe your cross was the handle to your shovel, you know, or something, or whatever. You could, in a very small way, it's like, well, I could use this also for worship or whatever. But I mean, I'll just use the example of what I've been doing. You know, like that cross in this video was also the cross in worship, and my personal Bible was the one I put on the table. And it's like, oh, you can see how nobody in the room can see that the scripture on that table is open to the scripture of the text that we're preaching from today. But if you knew that, like, it's like, oh, that's kind of interesting, or that's like, there's a layer of meaning that's placed. It's not just symbolically a Bible on the, and how much more meaningful actually would it be if that was the Bible that someone picked up and say, we're going to proclaim scripture from the Bible on this table, and it's, you know, somebody in the church's Bible, and it's opened to today's text. But like, oh, that's kind of clunky, or, you know, they can't see it really well. Let's print it off. And so so it's then and let's just read it off a phone. Or like everyone's got their, I don't know, there's just like this, like you said, the layers get like taken off, the garments of skin or whatever, and of meaning. And you know, and these things that get compressed, that are able to be carried also through time. The experience that I had when I was 16 and I was like leading like a, you know, we used Third Day earlier. I don't remember what song it was, like on a Sunday night at our Southern Baptist, First Baptist Church. and one of the deacons was so angry he just got up and left. It was because I was stripping away meaning, like, and he could probably had all those sorts of other reasons or whatever, but like, people though now, like in 20 years, if you like aren't playing modern worship and some guy comes in with a hymn and an organ, you're like, dude, you're trying to like constrain us back into tradition, like, no, we need to be free with these new songs. And it really comes down to something about meaning, like how these things are passed through time but I liked that illustration of, the things being compressed down into multiple use, but also multiple compression of meaning. Like there's a compression, high level of meaning in these things. And even think about like the family Bible that used to, hey, we're putting wedding dates and baptism dates, and the family tree is in this book, like passing through time. And we're like, like, 23andMe, anyways, I don't know.
Yeah, this is this is really, really profound. I think, Matt, you made a fantastic point, and great job elucidating, Christian. You guys are just, my mind's really kind of like buzzing, because I think one thing I've experienced in just kind of participating more in like the Catholic liturgical calendar and like mass readings, readings from the lectionary, is the way that these readings, what they do is they stack these different readings from the Bible. So what it does is it puts different portions of the biblical narrative in conversation with each other and in conversation with history, like in conversation with a saint day. So you're thinking about a saint and you're thinking about an Old Testament scripture, a Psalm, a New Testament scripture. And just the meaning that is birthed from that kind of
Compression.
bringing these different fragments together in conversation is just, it's incredible. I mean, and so, yeah, like absolutely. When you break these things apart, which gives a lot of power, I think that's why it's done. So my background's in agriculture. So you think about industrial agriculture, what it does is, you raise livestock over here, you grow the corn over here, you cut the hay over here, you process all the animals over here. Why that's done is, for scale, for production, for harvesting the fruit. You can harvest way more fruit doing that. But what it does is it destroys, like we're talking about, it destroys the meaning, where, okay, now you're a farmer who all you do is grow corn and soybeans. And does it feed your community? No. What it does is it feeds
The world.
the world. Yeah, no. I mean, what it does is it feeds, these cows over there on this feedlot, all the way out in Colorado or somewhere, right? Where does that meat go? Well, it gets distributed nationwide. Like by breaking these things apart, like these things lose their meaning, but we get power from it. Like it has an effect. There's a reason. Like there's a reason why we've done this. But then, it leads it kind of meaningless. And I think about this in terms of the Bible, where, okay, evangelicals have their Bible verse of the day. What's the context? You just have a Bible verse, like
your life, your present moment.
Like
to Matt's point earlier.
For me, like being grown up in the evangelical, I have no, like, what does that verse mean? It has so little meaning. Like, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Does that mean that, if I pray to Jesus, I'm going to win my football game?
Yes.
Right? Like, is that what it means? Like, it can mean anything. So it means nothing. And so, yeah, like, absolutely. Like, putting things back together, which I'm a little more hopeful, Matt. I think it is possible. Like, I really do think it is possible to put things back together. But I think it just is going to look different. And that's the the thing that actually is, for me, like creatively inspiring about being an evangelical, like having all these pieces, and you can think, how can they come back together in a way that's contextually relevant? Like, that's the thing. For me, my family, the families who I live close to, like, how do these pieces fit into our life together that's meaningful? And it's going to look different for me than for you, Matt, than for Christian, because we have different contexts, and that's where it's so context dependent. Like, anyway.
Yes.
I love the picture of the home farm that you paint, and then that it gets scaled out or decompressed or decompartmentalized into, industrial farming. But it's like, you can just like, I can just see like, and maybe it helps. I've got a friend that him and his wife have like a home farm with a cow that they could milk and some goats, and they had chickens and some pigs, and they maybe were planting some stuff. And it is much more romantic, and the meaning for the people, and even what it means, like you said, the collective knowledge and wisdom of a farmer like that, like of what you have to, all the things. And that was kind of, my dad grew up a little bit like that. I got a little bit of it when I was a kid. My grandfather had like 1,000 acres that he was farming agriculture on, cows. And so it's like, but that was one person, like it was him, like he was the farmer, and that was his thing. And he knew how to operate a lot of machinery because he had run a mine in the World War II mines. And so it's like, all that's been decompressed, decondensed. But the idea of farmer, more mimetically, this kind of home farm, is more enchanting. And it's, but it's also really hard. It's also really hard, and that's
there's a reason why.
These
people who grew up on farms and then fought in World War II, they didn't go back to farming. Like, there's anyway, there are reasons.
I don't know. Matt, are you cooking on anything?
Just thinking about, Luke says he's a little bit more optimistic, and I say up to a certain scale, there's things that are possible. Part of the problem is that what used to be environmental constraints that force these things to happen, since those have been taken away, all of the constraints are internal. They're functions of the will.
Yes.
And you can only will so much. If we want the kind of like parish sort of like system that Ross is advocating, we need, honestly, some charismatic psychopaths to lead the charge and start doing it. I think that's kind of what it's going to take. The people that are able to really lay down a come follow me and die. This is good and everything else is awful.
Well, I mean, that's part of the vow, though. That's interesting because the time scale think about the church plant's time scale. We have to plant, we have to get the marketing up, and then we have to grow this thing as fast as humanly possible.
Yep. 3 years.
Is that maybe that's the number or whatever.
3 years to self-sustaining.
Okay. So we were self-sustaining in like 6 months in a basement, because everyone was doing everything for free, but we also weren't trying to run the scale program. And so it's self-sustained for over 2 years as a result. And it was easy. And I kept pumping the brakes on, no, I don't want us to buy a laptop, and I don't want us to buy ProPresenter, because then you have to have a ProPresenter expert, and then you have to I wanted things to be as simple as possible, while at the same time infusing tons of meaning. And so now we're self-sustaining, with a pastor, with a very small amount of people, but the commitment level has to be you will kill. Okay. One of the things that one of our leaders, we don't have official elders, but it was I do not want every Sunday for us to be putting up 150 chairs in a gym. That will kill me. That's what he was saying. That will kill me. And not death, but that will kill his spirit. That will kill his and so this whole project has been anti-church plant from the beginning, anti that whole model from the beginning, because a lot of us have done it. And the other piece about it was that you're talking about is the what was it you said, the radical thing. The radical thing is that it's not a 3-year commitment and to sink or swim. It's a vow for, like, my time scale is the rest of my life. Like, my time scale, like, I'm not going anywhere. Like, this is home. My time scale is the rest of my life. That's kind of the mentality. Like, it's not like my time scale is like the anxious 3 years of success. Like, my time scale is literally just like I'm the rest of my life. Like, I don't have to be in a hurry in a certain way. And the vision again of like, who cares how many people we can get here in 3 months? Like, how many people can be born, baptized, married, and buried here? That is the radical thing I think that I'm interested in. And how many of these kids might actually be interested in being quote unquote Presbyterian when they're 20? That's actually a really interesting question. And that's a recompression of identity versus we're just all Christian. We're all part of the meta-Christian narrative, and like giving people back an identity of a meta narrative, and not because this is better or worse than all these other traditions out there, but it's literally just like, because I can give them a tradition. And so like, I probably am in that kind of radical camp. I don't know if I'm charismatic enough. I'm probably like too much of an angsty musician to like be the happy, like I'm gonna, like I'm a little more angsty related, but it is gonna take that, Matt, I think, in a way. And I think that's probably what you dropped. Was it you who dropped your de-zoomer earlier in the conversation? I can't remember. Somebody like that dude's radical. Like, and he's raising up an army of radical 20-year-olds. And I think also that's the interesting thing about when Aaron Wrenn, I garnered a follow from Aaron Wrenn on Twitter this week because his post on Redeemed Zoomer was like, I don't get everybody's issue. Every successful Silicon Valley person that I've ever seen was a 20-year-old with this kind of, like, he's the only one I've seen that has that kind of like juice. The Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk juice of a 20-something that thinks that they can change the world. And that's why I'm fascinated by him, because he's 22 and he has 550 subs and 13 million views on his 12 Christian denominations video. It's like, everyone can get mad at his ideas, but like his mimetic powers are insane. And so like, like, I'm not saying he's like got all the right answers, and he doesn't have a lot of wisdom.
Roots.
What? Yeah. And
well, I don't know the status of his roots. I hope and pray, but
you haven't seen his roots.
Right. I don't expect to. I just see how he comports himself online, and it's another moment of like, not my circus, not my monkey.
Too based.
Yeah. Well, okay. I'm just gonna say this. I think everything we're saying is contra the trajectory of Redeemed Zoomer. Like, we're talking about post-liberal, rooted, the radical nature of staying put, the radical nature of focusing on your community, not focusing on the world, focusing on your neighborhood. Okay.
I think he's inevitably, though, he is asking that, because if he's asking you to go to the First Pres, the First Methodist, that is intrinsically the parish.
Yeah. No. Okay. How he would have power is, yes, if mimetically he inspires people, say like us, to be thinking about, how am I going to live this out in my local community? Yeah.
I do think that there is going, like, if he's asking you to go to the main line, it is asking you to retake the parish, actually, because they were the parishes. They are the physical embodiment of the parish, of certain parts of your town. Like, if you go to a mainline church, you are like, they're generally not going to be in the suburbs. And depending on what size town you're in, like, because if, like, I was having this conversation with my mom, because what's really fascinating, like where I'm from. So first you can look at, there's First Baptist, and then there's West Baptist, and then there's Calvary Baptist, and then there's Ruddle Hill Baptist. And when I was in my early 20s, the Baptist Association aimed at the little town that I grew up in, that's 15 miles north of our town. And they were like, we're starting a Mission Baptist church in that little town. And this was like early 2000s. That was contra to church plant. The thing that was rising up next to it was church planting, the church planting movement. The association was doing the next Baptist mission. That was like in the line of these Baptist missions that had happened all over our town. They were, and that mission died. It was planting a traditional Southern Baptist church 15 miles north of our little town, supported by the association. That was the model. And then came church startup culture that says, I don't need your association. I need the charismatic church, and I need the suburbs, and I need a big parking lot, and I need a cheap building with really good technology. And I can blow your association out of the water. And at the same time, you kill the association, because that church only is more in common with the non-denom gospel-centered church that's over here. He doesn't really, that church doesn't really care about the Southern Baptist Association. Doesn't really care about that traditional network. It really, is like, has all these other values, and ultimately actually wants to siphon off people from those parishes. And so, that, to me, what he's doing is he's anti-evangelical in that way. And he's pointing people back to parish. That's why I think that in a certain framework, there's a certain part of it that aligns with this Parish Manifesto, because it intrinsically is like trying to reclaim parishes versus startup cultures that are going to continue to bust apart those associations.
Yeah, no, I see that. I think I just am more and more weary of the means of mass communication, because it can be so ideological.
Yeah.
And ideology is antithetical to what we're talking about. Like, what we're talking about is kind of in some ways anti-ideological, because it's responsive to the people we live around. Like, it's responsive to context. And so I think I have a skeptical posture towards someone who just is like, this is the right way. This is what we're going to do. This is going to save the church. This is going to whatever.
Sure.
And I don't know. Maybe you could argue that Ross is saying that, but I don't know. For me, Ross is more like a quiet, hey guys, what about this? I don't know.
Because because he's you're a product of your time and your generation. I'll say Redeemed Zoomer is too base for my taste, but he's he's offering all these nihilistic guys a war and a journey that actually is better that's actually better than the alternatives. And
yeah,
because it just is you can't he's offering them a hero's journey, the Reconquista, that is better than the nihilistic, anti-woke journey that is also being offered to young people. So that's why I think there's a intrinsic goodness, because even he's saying, go to your church, influence, but try to be a Sunday school teacher. That is a much better, and listen to your pastor, if it's somebody, whatever, it's that's a much better vision than war. His version of war, the Reconquista.
If you're simultaneously trying to be, I don't want to drag this project too much, simultaneously dramatically, theologically, and ideologically misaligned with the pastor of your church, but also seeking influence, and I assume trying to be honest in those positions, you are creating the conditions for splits, creating the conditions for schisms. Could be what's necessary, could be what's not, I don't know, but that's sort of, Like, because you're throwing a lot of the really, really, like, if it's the really, really young Zoomer guys that are getting behind him, you're also getting a people high in enthusiasm, low in wisdom by definition.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah. That's what war is. That is exactly what war is. War is
Yes.
ideological. And I'm just like, and maybe it's because I'm 35 and I've got a family.
Yep.
I'm not interested
not-
in war.
it's not-
And maybe
it's not our
maybe
war. It's
Christian,
not
what
our
you're
war.
saying is there are young men who are all hyped up and they're gonna fight. And you're saying someone's got to lead them into some kind of battle.
That's
so
better.
maybe this is a better battle.
That's what
Guys, we're watching the birth of the mainline version of Ortho Bros. This is kind of incredible. This is the Young Rasmus Reform, the Ortho Bros, the Tradcast, whatever the mainline is. We got to coin the term now. We can make some money off this.
Yeah,
I mean, he's
so
already
anyway.
doing it. He's already making money. That's the.
Yeah.
I mean, and the thing you got to also look at, like,
people always make money off war. Someone.
what's
always
interesting is the only thing he sells on his YouTube channel is a Presbyterian sticker for $2 out with a sub base of 550,000.
Okay, respect.
Okay,
Respect.
okay, and he's going to seminary. He's not like trying to be that in that sense. Like, we'll see what he does with his channel during seminary. And he started a nonprofit that is literally created an addendum in the PCUSA that allowed for conservatives to still be hired as pastors. He is the reason for that. Like, that's actually because it was about to be cut off completely. His Presbyterians for the Kingdom nonprofit, which was a group of about 15, 20-year-olds that have joined him. Like, I'm saying there are Andrew Tate alternatives to what, war and what you want to do with that spirit.
Yeah, but I think, okay, going back to Ross Byrd, and we'll probably have to land this plane because I do have to work today. as awesome as this conversation is. But I do think that the spirit of Redeemed Zoomer is a different spirit than the spirit of the Patient Kingdom.
Yeah.
I honestly feel like Ross Byrd is presenting a different mode. And I think I am just fundamentally skeptical of the long-term, lasting, deep growth, fruitedness. Like, does that make sense? Like, long-term fruitfulness of the Redeemed Zoomer approach. I think that is what I am critiquing here, because I really do think it's a different model than Patient Kingdom. I think Patient Kingdom
is. I am in a Patient Kingdom model. The thing though that is interesting is that it's not encouraging just continued online. He's not encouraging you, like, he's encouraged you to come, and he's had to do it. He said, I thought I'd come into this church, and they didn't let me on their pastor search committee, but you know what? They let me be a Sunday school teacher. That's insane. That's an insanely good. Like, yeah, we're not going to let the 20 or 2-year-old on our pastor search committee, but we'll let him teach a young adults Sunday school class. Like, that's a really great coming into contact with reality of a situation where he still's like, well, I can still have influence here. It's a more humble influence. And I don't know, because you have to do something with that, the angst of your, like, Aaron Wren wrote an article about John Piper's seashell sermon from 1999 or 2003 or whenever he preached it at One Day Passion or whatever. And, like, he basically told 30,000 young people that he was their father and gave them a vision for mission in their life. How many of those people became pastors and did foreign missions and blah, blah, blah. Like,
but I'm sorry, your father knows you. So, like, John Piper's not my father. Like, this is where I just, like, I fundamentally disagree with this whole model. Like, this is the model of broadcast. that you're talking about. Like Piper's not my father. Jordan Peterson's not my father. My father's a real person. Like a mentor has to be a real person. And I think this spirit of antagonism, it gets in the way of actually experiencing community with your neighbor. I think that's what it is.
Yep.
My only thing is that trying to encourage people to go into a church will automatically put you into that. Like you will be like, he's not asking he's not trying to get people to go plant more churches. He's saying go revive the churches that already exist. And that's why it's not the same as the kind of what Piper was doing. Like he's encouraging people to go be embedded in small communities of Christians.
But I'm talking a lot. Matt, do you have
I feel like first off, like truly prophetic work is broadly hated. So like he could be right and I just can't see it. I have deep reservations, but he could be hearing messages I cannot hear. And so I commend him to God, while also if there are young men in my orbit who are deeply attracted by his work, I would encourage them to pump the brakes a little bit. Or talk about those impulses and how to direct those locally. But again, that's just like not condemnation, just deep reservation. And part of the reason that reservation is so deep is because that relationship between people on the ground and YouTuber is so abstract. It's so big.
That's what's fascinating about the call, because it's not a call to abstraction. It's a call to go back to these old church buildings with like old people in them.
Success in this mission requires you to get embedded into a network, though. Otherwise, you are going to get chewed up and torn apart by the dragon you're going to go fight. So I think that's hopefully going to be part of, as his Reconquista goes forward, the iteration and recognizing that more support is going to be necessary for success in this goal. But if you're just animating individuals and sending off to fight individual wars with institutions, a lot of them are going to get smoked by the institution.
That's true. But the thing is that they're 20. Like I'm not, I can't do that anymore. Like you said, you talked about Luke, you're like, I'm 40, I've got kids. I can't
we can serve our young men by not setting them up for disillusionment when they're 20.
Everyone wants, like disillusionment. I don't know. Like
it's gonna happen, but you can do it in really extreme ways. Okay, yeah, sure. I'm sure Piper animated a lot of those 30,000 people to become successful pastors.
But not
what
just
about the other ones.
Not just that.
What about the other ones that were emotionally like brought into the moment, went on career paths that ended up not panning out? Like that's also like how responsible you handle your platform can increase or minimize, say, like future generations' deconstructions, depending on how gently, carefully, skillfully you handle the people you're influencing.
Yeah, how many of those Piperites are ex-evangelical now? Because they didn't have a relation with that mentor. That mentor was abstracted, and he wasn't able to speak to them in their specific context.
I think the message is simple. Like even in the idealism, like, go so he has a map, right? That he's of churches that are broadly not like super progressive within the main lines. And he says, go to these. You're automatically putting these 20-year-olds in contact with saints. Like older people that have even though they like to support, they're like, instead of going to the next decompressed thing, go back to these older places with these traditions and just go have kids in these. Like he's not actually calling them to war. He's calling them to tradition. And
he seems to be placing a tremendous amount of faith in an institution that he believes to be corrupt.
all of it, like
He's
that.
saying it's.
But
I know. Like all I'm saying is like deep reservations. By all means,
What institution isn't
go with
corrupt?
God. If he's saying that his tradition has been completely taken over by like progressive bad actors who are leading his denomination down a bad path,
He's
and
also
he seems to firmly believe that like the kind of leadership your churches have really, really matters. Then how is the ethos of the head of these churches filtered down to the body? Like,
yeah, it's not a one. I think there's it's not only the specific thing, because like I have been influenced by him, but I'm not doing what he's doing. I'm saying that the meme is powerful in and of itself, and it's going to do a lot of different things regardless of what his personal thing is. And I think that's actually the more interesting thing is, and I think it actually plays into the Parish Manifesto because it's contending with tradition and a traditional history and the traditional meta narrative and even a more traditional way of life in these older Christian traditions. That's why I think that there's actually something there versus whether he says everything right as a 22-year-old or not. And that a 13 million viewed video about every denomination that's actually ecumenical, and like it gets people into like a more like ecumenical mind as these 20-year-olds. I think that that's actually very powerful and positive, versus just every idea and everything he says with Trent Horn or everything he says with, as a 22-year-old with Gavin Ortland or whatever. Like, I think there's other things that are powerful mimesis related to what he has sparked in a way that it has to be. If there's that many subs and there's that many, there has to be something that's powerfully mimetic there that's resonant.
There's power there, but this whole conversation has been how the tools of power do not always lead to meaning and connection. So I think that's just that's just where I'm coming back to. It's powerful. It resonates. So I'm not disagreeing with that, but I honestly I think there's a better way.
I agree.
Ross is also calling us to a certain kind of war. Like there's also forces that are strongly going to resist like the Parish Manifesto being put into effect. It deeply calls into question capitalism and a number of other forces. And those forces are not going to let you resist them willingly. Like they're not going to be like, oh no, that's fine. Like
it's not a passive game.
A group of he's calling people to effectively a vow of poverty or something close to it. He's like an alternative economy that's not money based. I'm like, how many people reading this can even begin to imagine that, dude? With something other than Bitcoin, which is not what he's talking about, I'm sure. Well, I don't know. He's a Jordan Hall friend, then maybe he is talking about Bitcoin.
Yeah, I mean, the way that I would frame that is like a small community that supports a pastor that not for the sake of like scale, but for the sake of spiritual care. And I think that there's something in the traditional framework that is more the idea of pastor than of pastor in chief CEO. And again, I'll bring it back to, because I think that in there, so my wife was raised Lutheran Missouri Synod at a church here in our town that is never going to be a mega church, but it's connected to an institution that will allow that church to survive a lot longer than if a church plant fails on an independent level. And that the successful pastor that pastored there for a period of time when she was younger wasn't concerned with a type of success because he was within this institutional framework that didn't mean he had to be. He was concerned about the day-to-day, the sacraments and the liturgy, born, buried, married, or born, baptized, married, buried. Like there was a ness of that within that institution. And I think that the thing that is interesting to me about the call to go get people to go into these places and not be church plant scalers will call people to come into contact with that idea and that kind of parish idea of church in a way that to get evangelicalism to kind of wake up to this alternative with something like Ross's language of not being completely an assault on like the mental frameworks of evangelicalism is like Matt, you're saying, it is a giant task, because like even in this little thing that I'm involved in, like there's a lot of those like impulses at play that I have to kind of like be, well, I feel like as a jerk to kind of stand up for things that are in Ross's. I gave it to our pastor and we discussed his whole manifesto in a leadership team meeting a few weeks ago.
What resistance are you seeing, Christian?
It's not resistance. It's not resistance in a sense. It's like an impulse to. It's the impulse for scale. It's the impulse for broadcast. It's like it's not like those ideas are evil. It's like, oh, this is what you're supposed to do. ... And we got to look good on the internet. And so we got to be thinking about that when we're setting up in a way. And I'm like, I kind of don't care if it looks good on the internet. I'm more interested in like who's here. And that's just a completely different framework, but like historic mainline churches are really good at not caring if they look good on the internet. Like, I mean, just go Google some Presbyterian church service, go Google some Lutheran church service from any town. Yeah, we live stream. We put up a camera. It's like, they don't like, it's like not, versus, the first church I ever saw do it well was New Spring in South Carolina with church. They were like a sister church to Elevation. And in 2007, they were doing like digital live stream that was like high def, good audio. Like that was their whole thing, And so, but the temptation, is like that if a church doesn't exist on the internet, is it a real church is a question. And it was until about 1995, nobody cared. And, now we got like, oh man, our church got a website and our pastor has an email. Like, that was a big deal, 25 years ago. And so the pushback is not like it's just of where things stack in the priority. Because I think our church should have our pastor should have an email, and our church should have a website and have a social media page. I'm not contrary to that, but like where the emphasis is placed is actually important. It's like, are we that first, or are we like, is our idea about like here first? And that then comes back to this question of evangelicalism, even the idea of reach and of evangelism. Like, of course, our impulse should be for everyone that's not out here, because that's what evangelism is. So that impulse is deep, and in thinking about what is evangelism, and the Parish Manifesto, in my mind, is like you take a dot and you put it on your church building and you draw a circle, a proximal circle around that dot, and that's evangelism.
It's relational
and proximal,
and proximal. Yeah. But I mean, I agree. It is radical, but I think there's a radical patience to it. I think the radicality is, as an individual, like staying put, and not, it's like resisting the FOMO of a job somewhere else,
100%.
like resisting the FOMO of climbing the career ladder.
Yeah.
And instead, growing roots in your community, so that, the parents of the kids your kids play with, and you actually can understand the needs of your local community, and you understand what's relevant to them. It's like that approach of the it's like the gardener, the tilling the soil. So I think there's a way in which, honestly, Matt, I don't think the vision of the Parish Manifesto could fully be realized unless we're looking at some kind of like post-apocalyptic, post-capitalist America. I'm not even kidding, because I think you're absolutely right. I think you're absolutely right. The automobile is antithetical. And even just this idea of like sending your kids out to the best university to get the best job, like this, the Parish Manifesto, like that destroys the parish. That is why we don't have parish churches. But I think that's why it requires patience, because there are these huge forces that I think it's starting to crumble. Like, the global capitalist order is starting to crumble. And we have seeds planted in our heart that are like prepared for that future, if it even comes in our lifetime. I mean, and that, anyway. So that's where I feel a tension in my own heart, because it's like I drive by this old Presbyterian church. It's like, a 1-room building, with a little steeple surrounded by a graveyard, with this 1-room schoolhouse just right across the yard. Like I could just imagine, a beautiful little parish. Is it the Lord's will that we go to church there? I don't know, but the seeds planted in my heart, we'll see what the Lord does with it. But I think all of this requires such patience, because I'm not going to go around, smashing cars or something, to make this future come about.
Yes.
Well, it could be in a certain way closer than you think, because of like, even my illustration I gave up, like my brother, like what was his impulse, like to look for a church was like one service. Like that was actually a big priority.
Oh yeah.
So anyway, that was a pretty good last word. Matt, do you have any like last words for our time? I don't think Ethan's coming back.
Yeah, I think I'm just kind of like thinking a little bit about like, yes, Ross's vision requires a tremendous amount of patience. Kind of like the other question is like, how do you also like discipline that community? One of the questions I thought as I was reading through his Parish Manifesto, and like lamenting the fact that there's people that are driving 40 minutes to church from the east and from the west in different spots. And part of my question is like, well, if you're putting into effect a manifesto, do you just refuse to allow somebody to be a member of your church if they live too far away? Is that part of like, yeah, we love you, come hang out if you like, but you're not a member here because you live too far away? There's also the question of like, actually like, what are the hard choices you need to make to maintain this community? And also just my broader question of whether evangelicalism actually can count as a tradition or not.
I think it definitely
it's got. It's. Should have brought this up way earlier, but like it definitely has like a history, but I'm not sure if it is a thing in itself or just like a trans-traditional movement.
Well, the interesting point, because that brings up.
I didn't mean to open up another.
That's a whole other.
I am trying to see the next one. That's what I'm doing here. Anyway, go on.
John Stott was considered an evangelical theologian, right? And evangelical has a history, like it has an academic history, even like of a theological side that existed in the mainline tradition until about 20 years ago with the church planting movement. 25 years ago, the seeker thing was it was a market-driven new thing. Like you were an evangelical at First Baptist, or you were an evangelical at First Methodist. You were an evangelical at like within that. But then when churches became just independent, like and then partner that with kind of this scale growth strategy. I was taught basically in I can't remember what my capstone class was for my undergrad in ministry, was like we read some book and it outlined, you have the the small, the 30 to 50, and then the 50 to 150 to 250, and then the 250 to 500, and then the 5 to 1,000, and then these were, they didn't completely, they kind of gave you the pros and cons of all these different search. They didn't completely make the small ones negative, but you always kind of assume these are barriers to be broken. That's the whole thing, is these are barriers to be broken. And the Dunbar number, like, is not, I don't think it's a barrier. I think it's one to be contended with as a sociological human reality. And that is the question about scale and about evangelicalism and not what it meant to at one point to be theologically evangelical and not a fundamentalist and not a liberal. Like, there was a theological category that existed within probably some point of mainline Christianity in America. And then whenever you kind of extrapolated it out of those frameworks into the scale, it changed what it meant, because we're not necessarily talking about the evangelical theological tradition. We're talking about like liturgical frameworks at scale. So I think that's a distinction. And so, but everyone's got a day ahead of them, that we got to get to. And so I'm just going to hit our little, I'll hit some branding if people make it this far, and then we'll close this thing out backstage.
Midwestuary 2025, August 22nd through the 24th in Elmhurst, Illinois. A weekend you won't want to miss, with special guests Cale Zeldin, Paul Vanderklay, Rod Dreer, Elizabeth Oldfield, John Vervaeke, and Jonathan Peugeot. Midwestuary 2025, the Fellowship of the Spirit. Stay tuned for more details. Visit us at midwestuary.com for ongoing updates.
Hi, this is Christian Baxter, and you're listening to Yours Truly, a place we go to think out loud.